So, good evening to all of you. This is the last speech, so I will try to keep it short. But honestly, I can't let this meeting finish without thanking very much ACE, the Architects Council of Europe, for their great work. You may know it, or may not know it perhaps, but ACE has now been for 1 year a network which was supported by the European Union. And we did that with a program we have for culture, which is called Creative Europe. And this is a very small program in financial terms. It amounts to 0.15% of the EU budget. 0.15, which means that every time we invest €1 in something, we'd better make sure that we invest it right. And in this case, I'm sure that was a good investment. I'm also very pleased that this meeting took place in Leeuwarden, which has been so far a very successful European capital of culture, and that is one of our favorite schemes, which brings culture closer to the European citizens. Now, let me establish my credential first. I will repeat what some people already said. I'm not an architect. I would qualify myself in this respect as an architecture illiterate. And that would be a message for you, that perhaps you tend to underestimate as architects the amount of ignorance you find outside your circle of expertise. And you should bear that in mind when it comes to policy making, because my experience is policy making. I heard some very interesting recommendations from Oana this morning that you architects should get more involved into policy making. And I think it would be great that you do that. My role as a policymaker is to translate the complexity of your expertise into simple messages for the political level, because the political level lacks simplification, simplicity, sometimes oversimplification. You know, we can do it, make America great again, Brexit means Brexit, all this kind of stuff. And so translating the complexity of your reality to the policymakers, the decision makers, is not an easy task. So you should get involved into that. Because if you don't, we risk to fall in the trap of subjectivity. You know, I don't like architecture, this form of architecture, and that's impossible to carry out sound policy making based on subjectivity. That's why we wanted to use this European Year of Cultural Heritage as a way to promote not only awareness to heritage. That's not good enough. That's what we usually do. We wanted to use this European year to carry out meaningful and substantial policy work at European level, because heritage is a very broad area, and we realized that when we decided to start 10 European initiatives which would embody actually the European dimension of the year, because maybe you don't know it, but 90% of what's going on is happening at national, regional, or local level. And so we wanted to keep something at European level so that we can really start this policy work. This initiative, Heritage in Transition, is one of these 10 European initiatives. But yesterday I was in Venice for the closing event of another one, which we call Cherishing Heritage, which is about quality principles for interventions on built heritage. And by the way, one of the ambitions we have together with ICOMOS is to review the Charter of Venice, because the Charter of Venice is now 55-year-old and things have changed. So if the Charter doesn't change itself, if it doesn't adapt to the changing world, the risk is that it becomes obsolete or irrelevant. And we want to avoid absolutely this risk. So I mentioned 2 of our 10 European initiatives, and you see that they are about high-quality Baukultur, as explained in the famous now Davos Declaration of January. And Baukultur is a nice concept, it's a beautiful concept. And for some of us, I'm French, it's a new concept. It's not just about the material form of a building, it's about what's behind the building, the software, as somebody said this morning. It's about the cultural, spiritual aspects of the buildings. So high-quality Baukultur ticks a lot of boxes in our current policy toolkit. It means economy of natural space. It means respect of built heritage. It means smooth integration of contemporary architecture into existing context. It means effective design and valorization of public space. It means adaptive reuse of existing buildings. So Baukultur and this Davos Declaration are one of the best surprises and one of the most interesting breakthroughs we've had during the European Year of Cultural Heritage. It really focuses on the importance of our built environment and heritage in our daily lives. And one thing struck me particularly when we started preparing this European Year. Adaptive reuse is a topic which came back from various directions. And we realized that it's indeed a very powerful concept because it's clear, because it's consistent, because you can explain it, because people understand it. It makes sense, it's intuitive. So it's a beautiful concept for policy making. And let me just mention two challenges which I think are absolutely essential. The first is the environment, as was said by Heubert. We need to revitalize our historic centers. We need to avoid wasting our natural spaces, which are not renewable. We need to save the initial investment in these buildings in the form of embodied energy. So we believe that we need to think outside the box. In Vienna in September, I attended a very good conference organized by the Austrian presidency. And then relatively famous architect came, Jean-Philippe Vassal, a French one, and he explained that he would favor densification, exactly how Leo van Broek, the Bouwmeester in Belgium, does. Densification is a bit counterintuitive, but it's a way of solving all these problems. And this morning I heard a very interesting proposal from Janusz Jus from Tallinn. He said that we should avoid building new public building if we can reuse existing ones in the city centers. And I think that's a very good proposal. The second box that we can tick with reuse is that it's a way of ensuring sustainability of heritage buildings. And it was said many times, if a building has lost its initial function, it's at risk. It's at risk of disappearing because of lack of maintenance or because at some point somebody will realize that the value of the land is much superior to the value of the walls and the building itself. So we know that it's a very important risk. And again, I would quote Jean-Philippe Vassal. I'm sorry, I'm not a fan of it. I just discovered it in Vienna. But what he said was very interesting. He said, we should work with what we have, with what exists, the climate, the people, and the buildings. So densification and sustainability are key. I know that adaptive reuse may be a bit counterintuitive for some people. For instance, when it comes to religious heritage, for many people, a church is a church. It's not a library, it's not a cultural center. In other cases, people believe that our industrial heritage, as was said, has little value. It's not beautiful, it's not old, so why should we keep it? So we should work also on this perception. But there are lots of wonderful examples of what can be achieved with creative thinking. For instance, in Paris in October, when FRH organized this conference, we had an incredible example from the UK. Do you know what champing means? It's camping in a church which accommodates people, travelers, and you can sleep in your sleeping bag in the church. And this works. So, you know, creativity can be everywhere when it's about reuse. So, I would like to thank all the contributors, ACE, FRH, EHRI, EFFORT, all these acronym-based organizations, which did a wonderful work. And I would like to tell you very briefly what's next, basically. The year has been a wonderful experience, but we can't let it just be 365 days. It's not enough. We have too much to do, and if we were to stop now, we would lose all this embodied energy we have in the European year, and we don't want to do that. So we decided to propose a European action plan for cultural heritage that will start next year and will extend to 3, 4, 5 years, the time necessary to carry out this policy work I was mentioning at the beginning. So we have prepared some 60 actions based on the work we did during the year, out of which 3 will relate to adaptive reuse. And I don't want to go into the details because it will be too long. Just one thing I'd like to say. We'll be working with Europa Nostra and we'll be working with Mies van der Rohe together. 2 partners we have. One is about heritage, the other one is about contemporary architecture. And we will ask them to prepare together an award, an event, whatever, something, which will be about harmony, integration of contemporary architecture into existing heritage, to showcase what we can achieve, to show excellence also in this area. And there will be much more actions to carry out. So don't underestimate the value of this document. These are only 3 pages, but they can be extremely important when it's about carrying messages to the decision makers. It may be simple to your opinion, it may perhaps be oversimplification, but this is the kind of message that can be read and understood by the political level. The problem is not so much to write a document, the problem is to make sure that this document is implemented, and that's why we need something which is consistent and which is clear and which is convincing, and I think they've achieved this goal in this document. So if you consider the work we did on the quality principles on the other projects, and the work we did in this project, Heritage in Transition, what you can see perhaps is a new European approach to tangible cultural heritage. And honestly, if we manage to do that, this would be a great achievement of this European year. So thank you very much to all those involved. Thank you, ACE, for the great organization of this conference. Thank you to all of you.